with the Wi-Fi, we're looking at things. There are things you can do with certain Wi-Fi manufacturers where you can power down all of the APs on the floor apart from the ones near the entrances. So when something connects, it then powers the APs up.
Yeah, that's really smart.
So you can reduce your PoE load on your switches, and you're able to do all sorts of interesting things there to reduce your overall load that's being drawn out of your comms room.
Hi, and welcome back to the Teams Insider podcast. This week we have a great customer perspective. We've got Pardeep Gill, who is a senior enterprise architect at a large legal firm. And we specifically got into the requirements for new offices, Greenfield sites. Pardeep had a really interesting perspective on the kind of requirements for projects like that, how the architecture and facilities team work with the IT team, where AV comes into play, and more widely thinking about the user experience and what people need and want from office spaces these days. Many thanks to Pardeep for taking the time. Really appreciate his insights. And also thanks to Luware, who are the sponsor of this podcast. Really appreciate their support. They've just recently launched their new look attendant console for Microsoft Teams. So if you're looking for an attendant console, definitely worth a look. Many thanks, and on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Excited to have another customer perspective and a friend who I've worked with over the years. Pardeep is a senior enterprise architect at a global legal firm. We're going to get into a little bit about his role and his history, and then zero in on kind of Greenfield sites, new builds, and the implications for collab, UC, new ways of working. So Pardeep, thanks very much for coming on Teams Insider.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Awesome. So maybe just give us a little bit of context about you and your background.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in technology for 25 years now. Started at a financial organization, a global investment bank, and I actually worked there for about 14 years, doing a number of different roles. Started, as most of us do, in desktop support. And dealing room support.
Best way to learn.
It is, yeah. It's a baptism of fire. It was a great role. It was a small organisation in the UK at the time, but the bank grew, and I worked my way up through the different technology ranks, and ended up working as one of the enterprise architects there for the bank globally, and actually helped work alongside a number of people there and set up the architecture function for the bank, because it was quite a new function within the organization. So yeah, I was there about 14 years. And when I left, I had moved into a global legal services firm where I am now, doing a similar role as a senior enterprise architect, working across lots of different technologies. I suppose my main focus areas on my speciality is probably desktop and infrastructure, are the two areas that I spend most of my time dabbling with. So.
Awesome. And we were talking in the prep, and one of the things you've done a few times over your time at different companies is like new office, Greenfield site kind of scenario. So I thought that would be an interesting place to jump into. Let's talk that through. What does that mean in terms of a project, and how does it split between kind of the architect, facilities, what you do, what IT does? What does that look like?
It's an interesting area, because actually technology within buildings has been, I would say, quite a neglected space for a long time. The traditional technology areas, there's lots of focus on. So your network, for example, getting the servers right. There's the right people doing the right things in those spaces, and there's proper design work going on. But traditionally, the other building services have been run by the operations team, who are not technology experts, and they do their best to get it right. But these services, and when I say services, I mean AV is a typical example here. These services tend to or have become a lot more IT focused over the years compared to where they used to be. It used to be a TV on a wall with a VGA connector on the end, and you'd walk into a room and you'd plug in, and it kind of just works. Nowadays, there's a lot more to it, especially in some of the more complex spaces. And with the firm that I'm working for at the moment, like most professional services firms, actually. They tend to have one or two really large offices where you've got the focus and the right people to and the space to deliver really good meeting room experiences. But a lot of their other offices will be a much smaller, where space is a premium, and you need meeting rooms to do lots of different things, which is where technology comes into the design a lot more these days to make that multi-purpose room really truly flexible and work for different scenarios and different configurations. So it's all of those technology adjacent services, if you like, that are now
Yep.
coming into technology. And from an architecture perspective, we're seeing things like the challenges around putting proper service wrappers around some of these services that haven't been a traditional technology service in the past. It's not just AV. You look at physical security and surveillance is another one that used to be all coax cabling in a segregated system, and it's now all IP with
Oh yeah, of
lots of
course.
AI sat on top of it. And where you've got to start to consider things like GDPR considerations: where's the data being stored, how long are we keeping it for, who has access to it, all of those good things, alongside lots of these services where operations, no fault of their own, but haven't really had to consider that some of that stuff in the past. So it's a real challenge. It reminds me a bit of IT back in the 90s, if you like, where it was just get on with it. But
Yeah.
nowadays we're having to build those services around it. So from an architecture perspective, you've got to really start to educate people. Actually, we need to think about some of this stuff a bit differently, and we need to do some of this stuff a bit differently, so we're able to really truly support the business when they're trying to use some of these spaces and some of these services in the building. But we've started to take it a step further now, because obviously we're all geeks at heart, right? We love playing with some of this new technology, and
Yeah.
we're looking at lots of new ways of doing things in the building, which I think will really change the experience of how people use buildings as well. So from a tech perspective, we're looking at how we can, well, there's the obvious stuff, right? How do we keep everything consistent? So when you're in a building, you know how to use the meeting spaces because they're all consistent
Yeah.
across the board. Um, but alongside that, there are other things you can do, like, for example, how do we remove friction and get better use of the space? So we touched on it when we talked before we started. There's things like Microsoft Places coming. How do you book desks? How do we move our spaces away from allocated seating to unallocated seating, especially in professional services firms, maybe where people are very used to having their own space and their own dedicated desk. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting looking at all of these other services, looking where Microsoft are getting involved and starting to deploy their own platforms like Places, that we're all waiting to see how it comes and how it lands. Um, but alongside that, moving people away from an allocated desk creates a whole bunch of other issues, right? People love their own space, as I
Yeah,
mentioned, but
yeah. There are some cultural and
it's
people issues there, particularly if they've
it's a
had
real
that in the
challenge.
past.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. But people love having their stuff around them as
Mm.
well. So what do you do? We look at lockers, right? For example, how do you allocate and manage that in a building wide locker system where you've got a building of say 2,000 people, right? What do you do from a technology perspective to support that? You look at how the different types of friction that might be created as you enter a building. So the obvious one is, we've all been there: umbrella in one hand, you're on the phone in the other hand, and you're trying to get through the speed gates at the bottom of an office floor to get up to your floor. How do you take some of that friction away? Facial recognition's an option, right? Or can you use things like mobile credentials? Obviously, these days everything's in your Apple Wallet or your Android wallet,
Yeah, that's
right?
interesting.
How do you really need to give people a piece of plastic these days? Can we put things in the wallet? Um, when you get to the lifts, you lose connectivity. I so often see in my current building people stood there in reception on
Oh,
the
waiting to
phone.
finish the call because they can't go
Exactly.
up to their
But they're
floor.
talking
Yeah,
to
of
somebody, they're
course.
talking to might be a client or somebody else. So they stood there. And I've seen it all the way up to the most senior people in the organization. So it's a challenge we are absolutely focused on solving, that we want things like 4G, 5G connectivity throughout the building. We want Wi-Fi throughout the building, including in the lifts. So we use a term street to seat, that we want you to be able to walk in off the street and get all the way, if you're
Yeah,
somebody
yeah, yeah.
visiting to your meeting room, or if you're a member of staff, to your desk without losing connectivity. And so stuff like that, we're taking networks and other capabilities to a different level to just focus on removing some of that friction that you get when you're working in an office building. No,
I love
it's
the
really
first
challenging.
thing. The first thing that came to mind for you, I can tell you've been thinking this through, is the use case. You haven't gone straight
Mm,
to there are these new 5G pico cells and they're really cool. It's like, here's the problem: is like
mm,
we're giving the user friction on the gate through the
yeah.
lift to their seat. How do we remove those friction points?
Yeah, it goes big. So the other areas, we're taking cues as well for what sort of uh, commercial services are doing. You look at Costa, Starbucks, and being able to pre-order your coffee. Actually, how far could we do that in the building, right? So could we, for example, allow people to pre-order their coffee before they get in? So as they get up to the coffee shop, their coffee's waiting, they can get straight to the desk. Another area of friction that you could remove.
Mm-hmm.
Could you allow them to use their mobile credential to open their locker? Right. So again, it's all consistent through the building. Could
Yeah,
we integrate that with secure print release? So again, your mobile credential allows you to release your print jobs. It's just that consistency through the building, and because there's going to be plenty of friction for people that are very used to their own space, right?
yeah.
It's going to be a change for them. So if we can find technology solutions that, to be honest, hopefully are invisible to them on their day-to-day basis, but have helped remove some of that friction, is kind of where we want to end up.
And have you felt that there's a lot of motion at the moment about getting people back to the office, in the office more? I guess two questions: have you seen that, and is part of modern building design about making it appealing to come in? Like, if you're going to make me look for three different key cards and you're going to
Mm.
cut off my connectivity, and I can't find a room, why am I coming into town to go, or whatever city it is, to go to that meeting? So is that part of the thinking? Is it's a place you want to go to?
Absolutely, and you can see that with our proper architects, if you like, when they're
Yeah,
designing the
yeah.
building, and the sort of services they put into the building.
They'll be pleased you said proper architects.
Yeah, yeah. You can tell by the way they've designed the spaces. They want to make them as attractive for people to come in as much as possible. But
Hmm.
I'm in the office quite regularly, and I've definitely seen over the last my personal experiences over the last sort of 6, 12 months, the number of people coming in has definitely increased
Yeah.
quite significantly. Look, Mondays and Fridays are always quiet, right? There's that, but even that is starting to improve, I think.
Hmm.
Um, but in my existing building, the technology department sits as a in an open plan unallocated seating model. And unless you're booking a week in advance, you're not getting a seat on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
Oh, interesting. So that's a
It's
good
fully
litmus test
booked.
of where it
Yeah,
is at in
it's
terms of
that
people.
is, and we see it depending on the type of business that you're in. I think sometimes actually getting back to being in the office really helps. Um, Especially I think more junior members of staff as well. I think I can't imagine when I was starting out my career doing it like this.
No, no, I feel actively bad for people coming
Yeah.
into the space now. Everything I
Mm,
learned was being in early, staying late, going for lunch
yeah.
with people, like those little pieces, and
Mm,
like, how do you absorb that culture
yeah.
across any discipline, but particularly actually in legal, finserv, proserv? You're
Hmm.
wanting to attach yourself to someone senior
Hmm.
and learn, and it's very, very hard, like in a kind of remote model.
Yeah, it's difficult, and I think the more junior members of the teams are starting to see that themselves, and that's increasing people coming back to the office. So
Well, I heard from
yeah.
it was a trading house, and they were saying their grads. This was over the pandemic, so there's a
Mm,
little bit lapsed now into data, but they were like 12 months behind where they thought they would be compared to previous years, because they
mm.
hadn't had the same level of face time, and they were like, it's a notable, averaging over hundreds of people on these grad programs.
Yeah, and it's just the way grads and trainees learn,
Hmm.
right? As you said, it's just that osmosis of sitting with someone senior, listening to them talk. You, but if you're at home, everything's a meeting, and it's impossible.
Yeah.
You don't get the
Yeah.
same exposure. But no, it's been my life for a couple of years. The up and coming relocation and new building that we're working on. It's exciting though, because we're getting the opportunity to really push boundaries. We're supported on pushing boundaries and making sure the tech is truly first class in the building. So yeah, it's really
It
good.
feels like there's a lot of innovation happening in that space, like you say, on like
Mm.
security, also on like green and carbon neutral and all that piece as well. I know Cisco have been doing loads in the building kind of
Hmm.
area as well. I'm guessing that's another consideration.
It absolutely is. It's a massive focus for lots of organisations, including us. From a technology perspective, there's obviously quite a few levers we can pull, and we're trying to pull. So it ranges from doing things like when you're ordering a few thousand monitors, making sure they don't turn up with all the cables you don't need, making sure they don't turn up with a manual in every
I'm so
box.
glad that was the first thing you jumped to. I've been talking to like I spend a lot of time talking into different devices OEMs, and I feel
Mm.
like there's some that are doing a really good job on
Yeah.
like sustainable
Mm.
packaging and thinking things through, and accessories becoming part
Hmm.
items so you don't need them.
Hmm.
So it's great to validate that you jumped to that as one
Mm.
of the use cases, because I think people are making decisions as much
Yeah.
on that, particularly in our space of, or my space of room technology. Like you can argue some of the technology is similar, and actually the supply differentiation might be your
Yeah.
culture and environmental
Hmm.
credentials as much as anything else.
No, it's so true. It's a key part of any RFP process we undertake, right? We focus on it heavily. We've
Hmm.
got a dedicated team helping us with it, but we've like it's not just cables and paperwork, right? It's even to the point where obviously in a large office building, all the monitors are going on monitor arms. We don't need the stands with them, so don't send them to us because
Yeah.
they're all going to go in the skip. But they're also taking it a step further. Some organisations are support you and take it a step further, where they'll say, actually, if you're not doing all of this, we are going to change our packaging strategy, and we're going to put 4 screens in a box for you, so you get less packaging up front as well. So
Right.
it's really good. Some organisations are much better at it than others, and it's a key can
Yeah.
be a key differentiator, because a lot of the tech isn't that different when you
Yeah,
really
so I'm
break
saying
it
like
down.
you can make,
Yeah.
particularly on things like monitors, like
Mm.
there's a few vendors that I would say are, I'm sure they'll all say they're massively different, but they're much of muchness for an office use case, and that could
Yeah.
be the meaningful differentiation.
Yeah. No, and it's important. Then we're looking at also from a sustainability perspective how we really truly reduce our energy consumption from a technology perspective. So you mentioned Cisco; they are pushing the boundaries here.
Mm.
Um, they're doing some great things. Even I think I can't remember what they call it, but it's almost an extended standby is coming to their devices soon, which will essentially shut the device down to the point where it's using less than half a watt, half a kilowatt,
Right.
half a watt, sorry, watt hour,
Yeah.
and to the point where it's not even accessible on the networks. They shut the NIC down as well. But we are also looking ourselves at making sure that all of the technology in the building, that in a traditional building today you will see screens and meeting room systems on 24/7. We're looking at how can we truly shut this stuff down at the socket when we don't need it. So out of business hours, over the weekend, properly turn this stuff off.
Yeah, because you're right.
Um,
There's a subtle difference there between having the monitors in the rooms, or the panels in the room turn off and everything else is
mm,
ticking along, versus
yeah.
actually powering down, and things like being smart around floors and aircon and heating and stuff
Hmm.
as well. Like nobody's badged into that floor. Why are we airconning it?
Why are we doing it? Same for the Wi-Fi. With the Wi-Fi, we're looking at things. There are things you can do with certain Wi-Fi manufacturers where you can power down all of the APs on the floor apart from the ones near the entrances. So when something connects, it then
Oh,
powers
and
the
then
APs up.
yeah, that's really
So
smart.
you can reduce your PoE load on your switches, and you're able to do all sorts of interesting things there to reduce your overall load that's being drawn out of your comms rooms and your SERs and MERs. So there's lots of smart things you can do in that space that we're investigating. It's a real delicate balance between creating the right experience for our staff and our clients coming into the building,
Mm.
versus driving that agenda as much as we can to really drive down our energy consumption. But it's a really interesting challenge. It's stuff
Yeah.
that I think a lot of organizations haven't done yet. So when you're talking to manufacturers, they're keen to engage with you because you're trying to push the boundaries here a little bit.
Yeah.
Some of them are also quite nervous about it when you're talking about turning their equipment off regularly.
Well, it's interesting,
It's
isn't it? Whether they've
interesting. Yeah.
considered it at the equipment design phase or whether they're
Mm.
like, oh, this particular whatever it is it going to instantly snap back to being like legal's one where the room has to be ready the second somebody walks in? So if you're powering systems down, there's some kind of motion sensor there that needs to be back up and running.
Exactly.
So another thing, like one of the cliches about new builds that you hear is like the architects come in and design a space and then ITAV get to come in next and be like, oh, well, we want two 50-inch screens and the entire thing is glass and it's polished concrete floors because those look awesome but are horrible for audio. Have you found that IT and architects are engaging earlier, and kind of what are the thoughts around the AV story?
That's a great question. I think it's improving, is what I would say. For a large scale building, when you're doing a head office with multiple floors and lots of seats, you do get engaged at the right time, and we're able to include things like acoustic engineers to help design some of these spaces, right? So it's less of an issue. They're more open to softer finishes, finishes that absorb sound, but there's still problems with big marble tables and glass.
Yeah.
Everyone loves it, right? So it's absolutely an issue. I also think the tech has got better to deal with it. Right, some of the new equipment from some of the audio manufacturers is excellent when it comes to dealing with audio in some of our meeting rooms. I'd say where we as an organization still suffer from this, where we do suffer is in smaller scale projects where maybe it's a refurb of a floor in a building across the other side of the world, where they don't have as big a budget and a lot of the stuff is designed before technology are involved.
Yeah.
And then we're asked to, as you said, we're asked to then come along and say, oh, make this work. And you're like, I don't know if we can. There's only so far you can go with removing reverb and echo and all of that sort of thing. It is a real challenge. But as I said, I think the tech is catching up. The stuff built into the codecs, regardless of which manufacturer you're using, is really good these days.
Yeah, I think the stuff that's done codec side and cloud side on some of the cloud platforms as well is mad compared to where we were 5 or 6 years ago in terms of the awful input they can take that they make acceptable, like not great, but like not horrific.
Yeah. I remember we had we've got an office over in the US where we refurbed the office, and their boardroom had a big marble table in, but they also stuck in 2 coffee machines in the room. So when you were on a meeting and somebody would go and make a coffee, it was deafening on the far end because the mics would automatically zoom in on where the loudest noise is coming from.
Yeah.
But when you start to get the acoustic boundary sort of technology, the background noise removal, it totally solved the problem. The tech has really, really helped.
Now that's interesting to hear, because that's such a, I think, again, this is another thing for vendor selection that's interesting, is all meeting room systems sort of look the same on paper, but there's some real practical differences in terms of things like that. Like we've all got like noise cancelling, or we've all got audio optimization. But like you say, the proof is in the pudding in some of those cases, particularly when you've got those hard rooms.
Yeah, there are some solved problems you can't solve, obviously, but our life's got a lot easier over the last, I'd say, 18 months, 24 months or so. I think the other side of it for me is consistency. I touched on it a little bit earlier, but that experience from an AV perspective today, at the moment, I think it's still developing, right? So if you look at, for example, the MTR ecosystem, it's the best for Microsoft Teams meetings. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
It gives you that best experience. And to be fair, most organizations, most of their meetings these days are in Microsoft Teams. But if you do need to use other platforms like, let's say, Zoom, Google Meet, WebEx, and half a dozen other, whatever it might be, that's where I think MTRs need to catch up. And they're getting better, but they're still quite focused on that WebRTC style experience, which isn't the best in those platforms.
Yeah.
And often creates an entirely different experience depending on which platform you're joining, at the time. And that's one of the challenges that we came across, where we looked at focusing on a provider that could give us consistent connectivity to all of those platforms, maybe with a slight compromise from an MTR perspective for Microsoft Teams meetings, but really from a member of staff's perspective, when they're walking into one of those rooms, they're doing the same thing regardless of what meeting they're joining, and they're getting the same experience.
Yeah.
So they get used to that very quickly. We spent a lot of time assessing lots of different MTR providers, be it Neat, Logi, Lenovo, all of those in that space. And we then spent a lot of time looking at a provider that could do all of those platforms, like a Cisco, for example,
Yep.
to see where we wanted to end up, and we put it in front of our people and our staff, and got their feedback, and actually they wanted something a bit more consistent. The one advantage of a platform like the WebEx platform devices from Cisco is that we can flip to MTR in the future when we think because they will inevitably when they catch up in that space.
Yeah. You can kind of hedge your bets in that scenario, can't you? Of we can run them in the WebEx mode. It's interesting you brought that. We had Ryan McCarthy on the pod a few weeks ago, and he's a UC engineer at another legal, and he said similar things. It seems like legal in particular is the need for interop is so high because you're responding to the client's meeting or the client's meeting. You have to be able to join those different scenarios.
It actually goes further than that, right? With what our lawyers are telling us is that sometimes the client dictates the platform that has to be used.
Yep.
Right. So not only are we joining their, let's say we are a Teams house and they are a Google Meet house, for example. Not only are we joining their Google Meet meetings, we need to create our own, because our lawyers want to be in
interesting. They're literally dictating, even if you arrange the meeting, you must be part of the deal.
Google Meet, for example. Yeah. So as an organization, we obviously have WebEx licenses, we have Zoom licenses, we have Google Meet licenses, we've got the whole bunch for different clients, depending on what needs to be, what's required for that particular client, or the best way to meet them. Because look, ultimately, they are clients of the firm. We want them to have the best experience. So we need to make sure our meeting rooms, which is really hard, by the way.
I say it puts a pressure on you in IT architecture to. It's a very hard challenge. None of the cloud platforms are playing super nice together. Like you say, there's that WebRTC direct guest join thing, but the industry doesn't feel like, unfortunately, the industry's got 100% behind it. There are interop services like Pexip. There's what Cisco are doing, but all of them are here's some compromises. Make your choice.
It feels like it's getting better, is what I would say. I think Microsoft are playing nicely with people like Cisco and Pexip as well, creating a better experience. Because the other thing around WebRTC, even if you're joining from a Cisco unit, the other problem is things like HDMI ingest doesn't work, right? And from our perspective, I get it and I understand why, but me trying to explain that to a non-technical person, you quickly lose them, right?
Yep.
And they don't really care. Quite rightly, they don't care.
They shouldn't. We start as technologists, we start saying, well, here's the reason, and so what? Make it work.
Make it work. That's what we're paying you for, right? Ultimately. Things like the work that Microsoft are doing with Cisco and Pexip are fixing some of those problems, right?
Yeah.
And so it's getting better. I just wish it would get better a bit quicker, personally. Yeah. But we're heading in the right direction.
Awesome. Well, Pardeep, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's nice to talk about that. I really feel like you've dropped some really good information on that Greenfield new office world. It's a really exciting space.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tom. It's been great. Thank you.
Awesome.